Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We are back again with Beyond Order, rule number 9. Before I introduce this rule, here's a quote just for this episode. Something we cannot see protects us from something we do not understand. The thing we cannot see is culture in its intrapsychic or internal manifestation. The thing we do not understand is the chaos that gave rise to culture. If the structure of culture is disrupted, unwittingly, chaos returns. We will do anything to defend ourselves against that return. Rule number 9 is if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. That quote was Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. If you don't recall from some of the other rules that we've gone through, rule 1, rule 2, all the way to rule 8. And now we're on rule 9. Rule 8 was try to make at least one room in your home as beautiful as possible, I believe. Try and make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. I got my book right here. It's literally falling apart. And I'm starting to second guess myself. I got distracted about 4 minutes ago because one of my hairs is sticking up in the wrong direction. And I'm thinking about that as I'm trying to share this insight with you. And then I'm thinking about how much I need these rules and this program and this process to level up as a human being. And I didn't want to omit that, right? And this is why. Well, I had my notes because I read this chapter multiple times. I highlighted, I transferred my highlights to the Word document, synthesizing or filtering what I thought, as Peterson would say, separating the wheat from the chaff, what I thought was most important quotes that stood out, questions that I had, insights that came to me, or interpretations of the rule. I'll put in that Word document, and from there I try to summarize it into a page. I lost my remarkable pen, still haven't got it back since the last recording, so I wrote it a summary on one page of 10 bullets, and the first bullet is to remind me to discuss rule number 3: do not hide unwanted things in the fog. And now I'm thinking about how, well, I might as well just say I was a little distracted about 4 minutes ago because there's a hair here sticking up that I need to fix. Is that count as hiding things, unwanted things in the fog if I don't address it? Maybe, maybe not. But rule number 8 was try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. And I was thinking that my takeaway from that rule is attention, paying attention to the meta, or the transcendent, or the beyond, having some type of existential confrontation with yourself and the world to offset the intensity from rule 7. Work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. There's this humility that comes with the willingness to face what is unknowable. It's just right. There's the known, the unknown, the known unknowns, the unknown unknowns, and then the unknowable unknowns, and the unknowable unknowns. I think that's all, right? Known, unknown, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, unknowable unknowns. The unknowable unknowns becomes a conversation of faith. And that idea of trying to make one room in our home as beautiful as possible is an activity of attention and intention, even a humble activity, or a um, humility creating activity. But there's a deeper metaphor there, I think, about the unknowable unknowns. And we can we have this responsibility to put our house in perfect order and do the best we possibly can for our neighbor, for our family, for our neighbors, for our community, for ourselves, for the world, for culture, despite the unknowable unknowns. And there's a there's a humility in that. There's a selfless sacrifice in that, because the unknowable unknowns mean that we won't know if we made the right choice in this lifetime. Now, there is an argument in the line of Peterson's thought that no one gets away with anything ever. And so that idea of hell, you may be living in it, I may be living in it right now, based on past decisions of omission and commission. And so, before I go into rule 9, if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. I was reminded of rule 3 and rule 6. Rule 3, do not hide unwanted things in the fog. Because if you hide unwanted things in the fog, of course, things that are unwanted that are hidden in the fog are less likely to be written down as old memories to be confronted with. That idea of passivity through life, or omitting and repressing and shoving a bunch of papers in a box and putting it at the back of the closet is not getting rid of the information that's inside of there. And I think in this rule 9, a big part of a theme of this rule 9, if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely, is that even if you don't know that you're upset by the old memories, those memories could be upsetting you. They could be disjointing you, the ideal you. There's a you that is potential. The future you is not just the inevitable future of what's going to happen, because time is constantly moving forward. The future you is the potential you, the potential in you that will never manifest itself. It won't be expressed in the reality that you inhabit for the remainder of your life in time and space, based on your genes and the exposure of your genes to the environment that has a relationship with the choices that you make and the experiences that have occurred in your life based on the choices that you've made, the choices you've not made, and the randomness or the connectedness, the interconnectedness of life, right? That becomes like a free will deterministic conversation. It's like, has everything ever happened in my life the way it's happened because of me? Well, maybe at some level, because of everything I did and everything I didn't do led to these circumstances. It's a thought for another day, maybe. I don't know. But the future you isn't just the you that is a consequence of time passing by. It's the potential you. And the potential you has a relationship with the past you and how you are confronting the past you. If old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. Now, it's one thing to be aware of memories that are upsetting you or me or anyone and being afraid to confront them. Peterson's making an argument that that's a fundamental component of our psychology. to not volunteer for suffering, or to not voluntarily confront the unknown. But when we voluntarily confront the unknown, we voluntarily do that. It takes courage, faith, and that courage, that action towards to voluntarily confront the unknown is going to increase the likelihood of the future us manifesting itself, the future potential of us, the potential that we have to become who we are, to become our potential, has a relationship with voluntarily confronting the unknown. And our past experiences have a relationship with our potential based on how we've confronted them in the stories that we are acting out, the stories that we not just tell ourselves, but we live out, because we live out stories. And so in this rule, it was very interesting. There's a handful of examples that are pretty powerful. Like one, for example, a young woman, she started having an epileptic attack in Peterson's office. And rather than reacting to her what perceivable epileptic attack, or the overtaking of her identity, something out of her control or out of her ability to respond to it, right? Some disorder. Dr. Peterson did not intervene, did not play into this story, did not play into this narrative. And it was revealed that it wasn't what he or others could have perceived it to be. It wasn't nearly as severe, and it wasn't even what this client perceived it to be. It was, and the way to actually cure it or to work through it was for him to not react and respond and play into that story. By doing nothing, it helped the client reorient themselves in a truer story. And how easy, that's an extreme, but like how easy it is for us as individuals to, and this is where rule 6 comes in, abandon ideology, to rationalize as a means of coping with the anxieties that come from interpersonal conflicts as a consequence of of the conflicts that occur through life, of facing the unknown, like, failing forward in our lives, making mistakes, not working through those experiences and understanding the lessons in those mistakes, but holding on to them, bottling them up, hiding them in the fog, and then them building up over time and altering our identities, altering our subduing our potential, or like creating disorder in the vying personalities, personal realities that are vying for dominance in the hierarchy of our identity, the hierarchy of our being. It's no wonder so many people in our culture today struggle with anxiety disorders and depression and feel a sense of being lost and hopeless. It's no wonder, because this is a component of the nature of our human being, the nature of our human beingness, um, in a Heideggerian sense, being thrown into the world and having to figure it out as we go. We're going to collect a lot of bodies, collect a lot of trash, collect a lot of experiences that may or may not be worked out and worked through, that ultimately undermine our future potential, our future selves. And Peterson's, of course, making an argument for an exercise that had been very successful with students over the years, this past authoring program, to actually write down our pasts as clearly as possible, to confront old memories that still upset us, write them down carefully and completely. And I think one of the themes in that is, even if one has been a victim of something, how can one look at that experience in the most personal, and responsible way, to attempt to look at, to with empathy and compassion and reason, forgiveness, not just for the other party, for oneself, the other party, to attempt to reconcile this occurrence that, like, so, the victim, a victim, let's say an actual, there could be people that were victims of something. Then there are those that were less a victim. Like, it's on a spectrum. How much of a percentage is one a victim of something, right? Am I the victim, or am I the bully? Which one? You might be the bully when you think the victim. You might be the victim when you think you're the bully. It could easily be backwards, but at what percentage? It could be on a spectrum. Looking at the past, even in the most serious, severe of circumstance, can the individual learn something from it, attempt to look at it from another lens, so as there's development of empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. It's altering the story from a reactive anxiety creating, leading to repression and further anxiety manifesting in other domains, to a proactive, responsible, more reasonable, and then useful. Like, for example, because patterns can continue to repeat if they are unbroken. Whether the individual, you, me, anybody realizes it or not, the pattern will continue to repeat. I've noticed this in work with entrepreneurs, those that have been betrayed in business end up betraying without realizing it. The mentor mentee dichotomy, the mentee, or you'll see in businesses where there becomes a disengaged founder. They're disengaged from the business. They're not nearly as bought into the vision as they once were, whether they realize it or not. They're not sacrificing at the degree they once did. The loyalists see this. Those higher in the dominance hierarchy are closer within proximity to those that one time articulated that vision, that mission, those values, and there builds, and maybe the communication is unclear. What's the aim? What's the vision? What's the mission? Yet, due to the loyalty and the proximity, the truth is not being shared, that the communication is not being had between the mentee and the mentor, or the C-suite and the chief, and resentment, the seeds of resentment start to be spread, and over time, and this is articulated so beautifully in rule number 4. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Over time, in that story, Osiris is killed by Seth, his evil brother Seth. But, like, Seth represents malevolence. I don't think, even in rule number 4, it isn't highlighted just in a business context, obviously. When Osiris stops paying attention, is not living the values like Osiris once did. The aim is not clear. The sacrifice isn't there. Now, impulse creeps in. And I think this is where there's a relationship to rule number 9. Impulse creeps in, reactivity occurs. Respect is dwindled, because respect has a relationship with sacrifice and the responsibility that comes with authority, influence, and power. And what if Seth was actually not evil until evil came between Osiris and Seth? So if you don't know the story, Osiris was the benevolent king, the pharaoh rather, had vision, created this civilization, made it beautiful and abundant. And then Osiris stopped paying attention. By stopping paying attention, that implies not sacrificing, not living up the values, not being responsible, being disengaged. So this disengaged chief executive officer. Seth, his evil brother, who represents malevolence, rises up and kills Osiris. Seth wants what Osiris has without the work. That's, without the work, without, because, he's not starting at the bottom. He's starting second, the penultimate leader, ultimately on that C-suite. It's not at the very bottom. It wasn't his original vision. Seth rises up and kills Osiris, spreads his body out around 12 different body parts around the civilization. And it's Osiris's wife who, I'm going way into the story now, but basically has sex with the corpse, and Horus is born. Horus represents the hero in the story who has sight, who has vision, who fights Seth, loses his eyes, and goes to the underworld and saves Osiris from the underworld. Horus representing the individual our individual capacity to rejuvenate the culture based on our individual capacity to rejuvenate the culture, our individual capacity to see a future that's possibly better than the current present, to voluntarily confront the unknown, to take on suffering, to even be willing to lose something of ourselves, to save the culture. The culture, and this goes back to that quote in the beginning, the culture naturally breaks down. And it could be unwittingly. That's why I love that word, right? If the structure of culture is disrupted unwittingly, that disengaged CEO is unwittingly disrupting the culture. That disengaged Pharaoh is unwittingly, doesn't have to be intentional. This is where do not hide undaunted things in the fog comes in. This is where, if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. Rule number 3 and rule number 9, if we don't hide unwanted things in the fog and we do confront our past, it clears up our vision. It will give us more confidence, more clarity. We can see further, right? Rule 2, imagine who you could be and ain't single money like that. We will be more responsible. We will be more engaged. We will be more apt to tell the truth as we see it. Because if Osiris started to see if he was paying attention, he'd see the discontent among his people to then be able to confront it. And at least if Seth was malevolent in and not just responding to the disengagement and saying, we need new leadership here, as coups d'etats often happen when there's totalitarian leaders that have stopped listening, that lack vision, that manipulate and undermine their subordinates. Well, then Osiris would be able to reactively, because that's the thing, we don't know, we reactively respond to the discontent and know that it was all right. It's just coming from at a left field. It's purely just someone wanting something they haven't yet earned. But if it's arising up because the person in Osiris's state hasn't fed the people, hasn't armed the troops, isn't reinvesting capital back into the society, isn't listening to their generals, isn't listening to the people, well, then they're not doing their job. And so it's obvious that they're going to be asked to leave, that the CEO is going to get fired by the board if the CEO is not doing their job. And the way to judge if they're doing their job is to look at the results of the company and to look at how they show up in respect to their job. Are they listening? Are they telling the truth? Are they aiming up? And so if old memories still, and this, if you're thinking like a CEO analogy, each of you listening is the CEO of your own life, the chief executive of your own life. Well, I guess in a sense, This is where marriage is so fundamental. Uh, your counterpart is also the chief of their own life, and if those two chiefs are unable to have a tussle, listen to one another, tell one another the truth, that they hide unwanted things in the fog, there's going to be a serious power struggle and an inevitable failure. And I guess this is a nice foreshadow to rule number 10: plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. Or is it, if each individual is the chief of their own life, they're going to take subordinate roles, CEO, COO in one context, CEO, COO in another context. And that's going to have to average out to the subjective agreement or subjective value acceptance of each party for there to be a meaningful, respectful, trusting relationship. And that's going to take a lot of conversation, and that's going to take a lot of attention and intention and commitment and values and sacrifice in real time, which is a lot of work and true buy-in. And that is a serious proposition. But how are we supposed to do that if old memories still upset us and we haven't written them down carefully and completely? And I think that's part of what the argument here is in this book. How can we have a relationship with another or others if the relationship we have with ourselves is unclear? It goes back to rule 1 and do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. Someone that has not put their house in order, right? Rule 6 in 12 Rules for Life. Put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. The haven't been educated to their ability or ambition. Family life isn't stable. Career is unclear. There's economic or health ailments. Friendships are not aligned. And I can go on. The less integrated one is as an individual, the relationship with himself, family, career, community, education, etc., the more likely one is to adopt ideology and to carelessly denigrate their culture and talk smack on other humans and over criticize. So it's like, put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Rule number 9 is a call to action to look at our past and understand what the stories are that we're living out, whether we realize them or not. And it's a call to arms to find a new story, find a better story, discover a better story. And I think this is throughout Peterson's works when he's talking about faith, like we who wrestle with God is, and I was watching the How to Plan a Life course last night, lecture 4. And Dr. Peterson was talking about Carl Jung and his interpretation of God. And man, it was, I don't remember the verbatim, but it was that ultimately God is that conceptualization was it of the story or the fundamental. I'm totally missing the mark on this. It was like, this is how I will interpret it right now. The belief in God is a way of acting out one's life, it's acting out a story that perpetually aims up despite the inevitability or the despite the world, despite the obstacles of the world, despite the arbitrariness of the world. It's playing out a narrative that aims up despite all reason and all facts, and to actually willingly confront and take on with almost like pride and gratitude. I guess this is rule 12, right? Be grateful despite your suffering. To take on the world with gratitude is irrational. And it's a story, it's an irrational story that if we take it on, our life will be meaningful despite the suffering, despite the pain, despite the tragedy, despite the inevitability of the tragedy, despite the factfulness that if we've been thrown in this world without our agreement, there's a victim or a reactivity. There's an inherent anxiety. There's an innate anxiety that can attract nihilism, that can attract what like the purest of perceivable freedoms that are more determined by our impulses than determined by the character that we build in and of ourselves through the experiences of our life where we say no and where we say yes. And there's this call to arms to not omit and not commit, not to rationalize, not to lie, right? Rule number 8 and 12 rules. Tell the truth or at least don't lie. There's this unbelievable energy, power in telling the truth as we see it. That doesn't mean we're right, like about the world necessarily. And then it's like at what level? But we're living right. We're living right, and the powers that be will like of the world will actually stop us from telling the truth because of how scary it is to take on voluntary suffering. But our future self, in the sense of our potential self, is on the other side of telling the truth as we see it and voluntarily pursuing the unknown in that way. The willingness to take on the unknown and to lose ourselves in the process, to actually cut off ourselves, to lose limbs, to lose arms, to lose our identity, is to tell the truth. And it's in that loss of identity that our potential identity, our potential is actually revealed. And writing down old memories that upset us is a part of how we confront our future relative to how much shit we've actually gone through. And all of us, you, me, everybody, have gone through, have suffered from, have been through things that to us are albatrosses, psychological albatrosses to our potential. Whether in the example of this rule, Peterson is talking about a young girl that was sexually abused by a cousin. And the story was, that of what it sounds like, something very serious. And the recognition in that context was that, oh, well, they were both like little kids, very, 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 very young. And it's like, well, looking at that through that frame of reference, like if you're 3 and one, I think it was like 3 and 6 or something like that, 4 and 6, a 6-year-old might seem like a 50-year-old but it's really just a 6-year-old. And like just thinking of it that way may have helped that person look at that story in a different light to work through it and learn from it and move into their future self at a higher likelihood of success, lesser anxiety, and more meaning than had they not looked at it that way. And the power of us, that story, that is there empathy there? Is there compassion there? Is there reason there where there otherwise would just be resentment and suffering? Or the individual that was being accused in Rule 9 by family of potentially being crazy, out of their mind, hearing, they're convulsing and all of these things, maybe even being schizophrenic, when what really was boiled down from some work with Dr. Peterson was that they had this very serious, it was a combination of a very serious fight with a life partner who threatened them, and how they were raised in an ideology of like, there is no evil in the world, it's only good. And they were operating from this naive, unbelievably naive, childlike, you know, ideological utopia And the realization that their life partner could actually physically hurt them led them to have all of these convulsive nightmares for months and months and months. And once they read some books like The Rape of Nanking and Ordinary Men, these are two good books I recommend. The Rape of Nanking was unbelievably powerful book, horrifying and necessary. And the Ordinary Men, which is about regular everyday Germans that were enlisted in the military in the Third Reich and sent to kill like ordinary people. They were ordinary men doing, extraordinarily terrifying things to ordinary people. Reading some of those books, thinking, basically was raised in an ideology of people who are only good. That's how they perceive their upbringing. Now they have this confrontation with a life partner that, makes them, forces them to confront evil that they never integrated in their self. And once they talked through it and shared the story and read a bit and, hardened and matured a bit as a human being, all of those convulsions stopped. And it's like our physical orientation, our physiological orientation has a relationship with our past, because our past self that's not been reoriented into and integrated into our current self is is impacting our future self, our potential, and can be undermining our us in scenarios that arise, scenarios of conflict that where we need courage, we have instead fear, where we need courage instead anger, where we need courage and love instead, vitriol and resentment and dissent. Rule number 11, do not let yourself become resentful, deceitful, and arrogant. So the story, so looking at the past, writing down the story and looking at it, what can I learn? How did I show up? Who was I then? What did I know at the time? What can I learn from it? What could I do in the future if this situation arises? It's going to give an individual, the ability to confront the unknown in a higher awareness, and actually that curse becomes a blessing. If you're listening to this and you're just thinking, I've been through so much in my life, I don't even know where to start. You start by if old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely. I'd recommend the past authoring program, because in the absence of doing that, it's going to have a relationship with rationalization. And rationalization leads to false conceptualizations of reality, which undermine our identity, undermine our personal responsibility, undermine our individuality, and leave us susceptible to adopt ideology, to participate in movements that appear positive and constructive that actually take away our ability to think for ourselves, be of ourselves. And we see this in our culture, and we see this throughout human nature. It's like, how do people lose their ability to be not only themselves, but their best selves in groups, in groupthink? Well, it might just have something to do with hiding unwanted things in the fog, abdicating responsibility, adopting ideology, not working as hard as they possibly can, at least one thing, and see what happens, not writing down old memories that have said, not following these rules, these 12 more rules for life, the 12 rules for life. I could go on and on. This is a pretty powerful, we're getting to this crescendo of this book, right? We've been through do not carelessly denigrate social institutions and creative achievements. You don't want to carelessly do it. But if you do the work, you can critically do it, which is a responsibility of the elder, responsibility of the master. And you can't imagine who you could be named single-mindedly at that if your vision's unclear. And your vision will be unclear if you're hiding in the fog. So do not hide unwanted things in the fog. And you will abdicate responsibility if you are hiding things in the fog, because then your vision won't be clear. You'll be Osiris. But no, rather, notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Don't do what you hate. Speak up for yourself. Take on that extra responsibility. And if it doesn't come to you in this life, it'll come to the next. Or if it doesn't come to you in this career, it'll come to the next. Or if it doesn't come to you with this client, it'll come to the next. And it doesn't come to you with this customer, it'll come to you with you to the next. It doesn't come in this relationship or partnership, it'll come in the next. But abandon ideology at all costs. Abandon ideology so you can gain your individuality. You could be a leader. Work as hard as you possibly can at least one thing and see what happens. But try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible so that your pride that's been earned doesn't become a hubris that's self-destructive. And now maybe all those old memories that upset you are actually part of why you're putting so much energy into the world, that life is constant paradox. Well, address them, understand them, reorient yourself in them so that way at some point you could burden power and you'll be able to be responsible relative to the authority, influence, and power that you get in this life. And so shit. Next, we'll talk about Rule 10 and the importance of relationship, partnership, love. Share this with a friend or an enemy. And we will see you next time on the Culture Matters Podcast.